So I want you to picture a specific image with me for a second. Just imagine a piece of paper.
Okay.
And right in the center of it, there's a doodle. But it's not, it's not a structured drawing at all.
Right.
It looks like someone took a really heavy black marker, pressed it super hard against the page, and just aggressively scribbled in these tight overlapping circles.
Just a total mess.
Exactly, until it formed this dense, impenetrable dark knot. A
Yep.
chaotic, squiggly ball of string where you literally cannot see a beginning and you can't see an end.
Yeah, if you just sit with that image, it immediately evokes this sense of claustrophobia.
It really does.
It creates a super visceral reaction of tension. When you visualize that kind of aggressive, unstructured overlap, it perfectly mirrors the sensation of cognitive overload. It feels like the physical manifestation of anxiety.
That is precisely the metaphor used in the source material we are diving into today. That chaotic, dark knot represents the inside of the human mind on an average day.
Which is terrifying, honestly.
Right. So we're looking at a self-published book called Think Straight, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life by Darius Foro.
Great book.
And the foundational premise is that most of us are walking around with this massive knot of mental noise. We're generating endless stress, engaging in this constant internal chatter, and just spinning our wheels in utter confusion.
Knot's
But the drawing in the book doesn't stop with the knot. Next to the scribble, there's an arrow pointing to the right, leading away from the chaos, and it resolves into a single, perfectly straight line ending in a clear circle.
Which is the goal.
Right. Moving from that dense knot of anxiety to that one single line of clear, useful thinking that is the mission of our deep dive today.
And, the transition from the knot to the line is just this brilliant visual representation of a staggeringly complex biological and philosophical challenge.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Not at all. To understand why that transition is so difficult, we really have to recognize what we're actually working with here. The human brain is the most awe-inspiring information processing mechanism in the known universe.
Absolutely.
It contains roughly 86 billion neurons, making trillions of connections. Its processing capability dwarfs our most advanced supercomputers.
It's wild.
Yet we are born with this miraculous hardware and zero documentation on how to run the software.
Yeah, we literally spend decades in formal education learning all these external applications, right?
Like math and history.
Exactly. We learn geometry, we learn historical dates, we learn how to format a resume or, write code. But the curriculum entirely ignores the operating system itself.
It's this huge blind spot.
No one pulls us aside to teach us the actual mechanics of thought, how to regulate, filter, and direct the cognitive processes that govern our reality.
Which is insane when you think about it.
Totally. And because we lack that foundational training, we just default to whatever background programs are running, which usually means becoming completely trapped by our own runaway thoughts.
Yeah, we assume that simply possessing a brain equates to knowing how to use it efficiently.
Right.
It's akin to believing that because you have hands, you're automatically a master carpenter.
I love that analogy.
It's true, though. Without deliberate training in the mechanics of thought, the brain just defaults to its evolutionary programming.
Which is not geared for modern happiness.
Exactly. It's heavily biased toward scanning for threats, ruminating on past failures, and generating anxiety just to keep us hypervigilant. That is exactly how the knot is formed.
So that brings us to the promise we're making to you, the listener, by the end of this deep dive.
We're going to give you the tools.
Yes. We are unpacking a practical, tested framework to untangle that knot. We're going to explore how to filter out like 99% of the useless thoughts that drain your energy.
Which is a bold claim, but it works.
It really does.
Yeah.
We'll look at how to make decisions based on mechanics rather than emotion, and how to train your mind the way you would train a physical muscle to achieve actual inner calm.
But to get there.
Right. To understand the mechanics of gaining control over the mind, we have to look at a historical baseline first. We need to examine the story of a mind that had completely and utterly lost control, and the philosophical breakthrough that pulled it back from the brink.
And the origin point for this approach to thought control is rooted in the crisis of William James.
Oh, this story is intense.
It really is. While James is recognized today as a titan of psychology and philosophy, he's often called the father of American psychology. In 1869, he was simply a 27-year-old man suffering through a devastating crisis of meaning.
The juxtaposition between his external reality and his internal suffering is just striking.
Yeah, on paper he had it all.
Right. In 1869, James had just graduated with a medical degree from Harvard. By all societal metrics, he had status, education, opportunity.
But internally, he was collapsing.
Completely. His time in medical school had been severely derailed by physical ailments and suffocating bouts of depression. He was experiencing severe panic attacks, and even auditory hallucinations.
Wow.
He wasn't just struggling with direction, he was fighting for his life.
Yeah, John McDermott, who edited this massive collection of James's writings, documented that James spent a significant portion of his early 20s simply trying to construct a logical argument for why he shouldn't commit suicide.
That is so dark.
It is. He was paralyzed by a specific narrative regarding his own suffering, a narrative born out of the medical and scientific paradigms of the mid-19th century.
The whole concept of biological determinism.
Exactly.
Because his father had endured identical, agonizing mental health collapses decades earlier.
Right, so he's looking at his dad.
Yeah, William James, viewing his situation through his medical training, looked at his father's history, observed his own identical panic attacks, and just concluded that his suffering was an inescapable biological inheritance.
He literally deduced that he was genetically hardwired for misery.
Which is a terrifying thought.
It's the ultimate trap, because if your depression and your panic are physical certainties written into your biology, the logical conclusion is that you possess zero agency.
You're just along for the ride.
Exactly. You are a passenger in a vehicle driving straight off a cliff. And that belief in absolute determinism creates this brutal feedback loop of despair.
Because why even try?
Right. If you believe you cannot change, the effort to change seems pointless, which only deepens the depression.
But that feedback loop finally broke in 1870. James encountered an essay by the French philosopher Charles Renouvier, and it triggered a massive psychological paradigm shift.
It changed everything for him.
James documented this realization in his journal, focusing on a really specific definition of free will.
Yeah, and Renouvier defined free will not as some, magical ability to alter the physical universe, but purely as a cognitive mechanic.
Okay, lay it on us.
He described it as, quote, the sustaining of a thought because I choose to when I might have other thoughts.
That is so powerful.
It's the hinge upon which James's entire recovery swung. The sustaining of a thought because I choose to when I might have other thoughts.
Oh.
James realized that determinism might dictate the thoughts that actually enter his mind, but agency dictates which thoughts remain.
Which is a huge distinction.
Massive. He famously wrote that his first act of free will shall be to believe in free will.
That distinction between the arrival of a thought and the sustaining of a thought is monumental. I mean, he isn't suggesting that through sheer willpower, you can build a dam that just stops the river of consciousness.
No, because attempting to stop the river is biologically impossible. The brain is an organ literally designed to generate thoughts.
It never stops.
It continuously processes sensory input, retrieves memories, predicts future scenarios. Like, if you sit in absolute silence for 60 seconds, you will observe random, uninvited thoughts surfacing.
Oh, totally. Like a fragment of a song.
Or a memory of an awkward conversation from 5 years ago. Or a sudden worry about a deadline. You do not consciously author the arrival of those thoughts. They are just the background noise of the neurological machinery running.
But the breakthrough lies in the realization that while you cannot control the generation of the thought, you maintain absolute authority over your attention.
Yes. Attention is the mechanism of free will.
Right.
When that intrusive thought about an awkward past conversation surfaces, determinism put it there. But whether you allow that thought to pass downstream or whether you grab onto it, analyze it, and let it ruin your entire afternoon, that is a choice.
You possess the capability to shift your attention to a different thought.
Exactly. It represents the profound shift from the victimhood of I can't help but feel this way to the agency of I feel this way because I'm choosing to sustain the thoughts that generate this feeling.
Okay, let's unpack this, because when I hear that, my immediate instinct is to view it through the lens of human fallibility. Like, the theory is elegant, obviously, but the application seems impossibly demanding when a person is actually in the grip of a physiological panic response.
Oh, it's incredibly hard.
Right. When the brain is just flooded with cortisol and adrenaline during a crisis, telling someone to simply shift their attention feels like advising someone in a plummeting elevator to just focus on the elevator music.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, it's like telling someone in a storm to just choose to look at the sunshine. The biological overrides seem way too powerful for simple attention shifting.
And the difficulty of the application is precisely why it is a discipline and not just some quick life hack.
Right, it takes work.
William James understood the physiological barriers intimately. I mean, it took him 3 arduous years of practicing this attention shifting to pull himself out of his depressive chasm.
3 years?
Yeah. So to navigate the neurological storm you're describing, we really have to employ the philosophical framework that emerged directly from James's struggle, which is pragmatism.
Now, pragmatism is a term we frequently dilute in modern conversation.
We do. We use it to mean something akin to compromising or just being realistic.
Yeah, exactly. But its origin as a philosophical school of thought is much more rigorous.
In the context of James and the later thinkers who formalized it, pragmatism is a ruthless filter for human focus.
Ruthless.
It requires completely abandoning the pursuit of absolute theoretical truths or inherent assumptions, and instead anchoring your focus entirely on consequences and utility.
I love that.
John Dewey, another architect of this movement, distilled it to a razor-sharp metric. He said, "The true is that which works."
The true is that which works.
Yes.
That fundamentally alters how we evaluate our own internal monologue. Because we typically evaluate our thoughts based on whether we feel they are accurate.
Exactly.
Like, I'm going to fail. This presentation feels very accurate when we are anxious.
But under the pragmatic framework, accuracy is totally secondary to utility.
Okay, explain that.
The pragmatic test asks, does sustaining this thought serve a useful function? Does it produce a consequence that actually improves my reality? If a thought does not propel you forward, solve a problem, or improve your condition, if it does not work, then it is functionally useless.
Wow.
And if a thought is useless, you must exercise that mechanism of free will and shift your attention elsewhere.
If the blueprint is that clear-like, we should only sustain thoughts that are practically useful. It raises a massive contradiction about human behavior, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Why do we violently resist doing this? Why do we spend hours lying awake sustaining thoughts about scenarios that will literally never happen? Or replaying arguments we can't change?
Because our brains are flawed.
Right, the source text points toward a structural flaw in the hardware. We fail to apply the pragmatic filter because we implicitly trust our own minds, and as it turns out, our minds are fundamentally untrustworthy.
We operate under this grand delusion that we are purely rational agents.
We really do.
We believe our prefrontal cortex is firmly at the wheel, making these logical, objective assessments of reality. But a deeper look at cognitive science just demolishes that assumption.
The architecture of our processing is deeply flawed.
And the systematic nature of those flaws was mapped out by psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman in the 1970s.
Legends.
They introduced the concept of cognitive biases. And a cognitive bias isn't just a random mistake, right? It is a predictable, systematic error in how the brain processes information and makes judgments.
Right, and the author of our text highlights that there are over 100 known thinking errors.
Yeah, over 100 documented cognitive biases actively distorting our reality every single day.
Over 100 invisible filters altering the data before it even reaches our conscious awareness. That is wild.
To understand why we have so many biases, you have to look at the biology of energy consumption.
Okay.
The human brain is an incredibly energy-hungry organ. It represents about 2% of our body weight, but consumes roughly 20% of our energy.
Wow.
So deep, analytical, objective thinking, the kind that actually requires the prefrontal cortex, it burns a massive amount of glucose.
And evolutionarily, that's a problem.
Exactly. In our evolutionary past, calories were scarce. So the brain evolved heuristics, or shortcuts, to make rapid decisions without burning precious energy.
I see.
Biases are just the side effects of those energy-saving shortcuts. They are evolutionary adaptations that completely misfire in the complex modern world.
So two of these biases are particularly responsible for generating the chaotic knot in our minds. The first is attentional bias, which essentially dictates that our perceptions are affected by our recurring thoughts.
Yeah, attentional bias is the neurological proof that your life is a product of your focus.
Which is a heavy thought.
It dictates that your perception is directly altered by your thoughts. So if you are constantly scanning your environment for threats, your brain will physically tune your perception to notice negativity, slights, and dangers while entirely filtering out positive data.
You literally only see the bad stuff.
Yes, your external reality warps to match your internal monologue.
It creates this closed loop, which is then sealed shut by confirmation bias.
The big one.
Right. Once the attentional bias decides the world is a negative place, confirmation bias ensures we only absorb information that proves we aren't wrong.
Exactly.
We will bend over backwards to avoid admitting our worldview is flawed. We latch on to the one piece of data that supports our anxiety and just discard the 99 pieces of data that contradict it.
And then we construct these elaborate architectures of assumptions based on these biased fragments of data.
Oh, totally. Like if a colleague is quiet during a meeting, we don't assume they have a headache or, slept poorly.
No, the biased brain assumes they are quiet because they realize I am an imposter, they hate my project, and I am going to be fired.
We jump straight to the worst case.
And we treat these rapid-fire assumptions as absolute facts.
This friction between facts, truth, and assumptions requires a philosophical intervention. The author references Friedrich Nietzsche's famous assertion, "There are no facts, only interpretations."
Such a great quote.
But at first glance, that almost seems to advocate for total chaos. Like, if there are no facts, how can we possibly navigate reality?
Well, Nietzsche's concept of perspectivism isn't suggesting that gravity doesn't exist or that physical events don't occur.
Right.
He is arguing that human beings have no mechanism to access pure, objective reality.
Because of the filters.
Exactly. The moment an event occurs, it is pulled through the filter of our sensory organs, heavily processed by our amygdala, and distorted by our 106 cognitive biases before we even become conscious of it.
Wow.
So by the time you experience a fact, it has been heavily edited. It is merely an interpretation.
So if the biological reality is that we can never truly know the objective truth of a situation, if we can never know for absolute certain what that quiet colleague is actually thinking, we have to stop treating our assumptions as gospel.
This is exactly where the pragmatic filter becomes essential.
Right.
If objective truth is inaccessible, you have to stop wasting cognitive energy arguing over who is absolutely right. Instead, you look at the interpretations available to you and you ask the pragmatic question: does believing this interpretation yield a useful result in my life?
Oh, good.
If assuming your colleague hates you causes you to spiral into anxiety and perform poorly, it is a useless interpretation.
Right.
If assuming they simply have a headache allows you to remain calm and focused on your work, it is a highly useful interpretation. You choose the interpretation that works.
To see the destructive power of ignoring this filter, the text provides a deeply relatable and honestly kind of overdramatic case study.
Oh, the London story.
London story.
Hmm.
The author, Darius Thoreau, recounts his experience moving to London in 2014, and it perfectly illustrates the cascading failure of a mind hijacked by unchecked biases.
It's a brilliant examination of how a minor logistical failure can trigger a full-scale cognitive collapse if the mind isn't trained.
So he was moving from a quiet town in the Netherlands to the immense complexity of London.
Big jump.
Huge. And he approached it with the expectation that reality behaves linearly. He constructed a rigid sequence. Cancel the old lease, pack the car, drive across the border, exchange the keys, move the boxes, and sit down to watch Netflix.
As we all do.
Right, he assumed the world would conform perfectly to his mental projection.
And that expectation of linearity is the first trap. Complex systems like a city of 7 million people and, real estate transactions, they do not operate in straight lines. They are inherently chaotic.
And the chaos strikes the day before he arrives.
Of course it does.
The new landlady abruptly backs out of the agreement at the very last minute. Suddenly, the linear plan shatters. He has a car filled with his entire life, his family is traveling with him, and they are effectively homeless in a foreign metropolis.
It's a nightmare scenario.
So they end up sitting in his parents' hotel room, and this is where his cognitive architecture completely caves in. He begins blaming himself, calling himself an idiot, catastrophizing the future, and just letting this useless chaos take over.
But notice the shift there. A logistical problem occurred, the loss of a lease. But his brain immediately bypassed logistics and attacked his identity.
That is so true.
The amygdala, perceiving a threat to shelter and stability, just hijacked the prefrontal cortex. He wasn't solving a problem anymore. He was experiencing an emotional survival response, masquerading as thought.
It is remarkably similar to a computer experiencing a systemic memory failure.
Oh, I love this analogy.
If you open 100 massive software programs in the background, simultaneously rendering video, compiling code, running updates, the CPU maxes out. The system freezes.
Right.
He was so busy running the blame and panic software that he literally didn't have the RAM to just open Airbnb.
Exactly. The system crashed because he was sustaining useless thoughts. He was ruminating on the past, which he couldn't change, and catastrophizing the future, which hadn't even happened. None of his mental energy was directed at the present reality.
But the resolution, the reboot, happens the next morning. He finally tells himself to think straight. He actively visualizes replacing that messy ball of panic with clarity.
He applies the pragmatic filter.
Right.
What works? Blaming himself doesn't put a roof over his head. Booking a temporary room does.
So he books an Airbnb for a week. And the irony, which just highlights the absolute absurdity of our internal panic, is that a week later, the landlady changes her mind again and lets him move into the original apartment anyway.
Unbelievable.
Every single micro ounce of suffering he endured in that hotel room, all the self-flagellation and despair, was biologically and practically useless.
Completely useless. It didn't change the outcome. It only degraded his experience of reality.
Which forces the core question of this entire philosophy. If we know we should only focus on useful thoughts, and we understand that our biases constantly push us toward runaway spirals, how do we actually filter the daily deluge of information and internal chatter?
The author provides a framework that operates on brutal simplicity. To filter the massive daily influx, you apply one universal rule of thumb. You only allow yourself to think about things you can directly control.
This eliminates 99% of thoughts.
Easily. It echoes the foundational premise of Stoic philosophy, specifically the dichotomy of control articulated by Epictetus. The modern application of this is acknowledging that our sphere of actual control is infinitesimally small.
If we draw a circle around what we genuinely control, almost everything we spend our time agonizing over sits outside of it. The framework dictates that we only control 4 distinct elements: our desires, our actions, our words, and our intentions.
Let's dissect the implications of that limitation. The weather, the economy, traffic, the opinions of your colleagues, the outcome of an election, the passage of time. None of these respond to your direct control.
Yep.
More importantly, the past is entirely sealed. Unless you are extracting a specific actionable data point to alter a behavior today, ruminating on a past failure is a violation of the rule. It is out of your control, therefore sustaining a thought about it is a waste of glucose.
The same applies to future anxiety. Constructing elaborate, catastrophic simulations of what might happen next month is an attempt to control the uncontrollable. It generates the physiological symptoms of stress for an event that does not even exist.
And if we ruthlessly eliminate everything outside of our desires, actions, words, and intentions, the mental silence would initially be deafening.
So what do we think about?
The text proposes that we should only actively engage the cognitive machinery for two highly specific categories of thought.
Right, the two types of useful thoughts. The first is thinking about how to solve a problem.
Yes.
And the definition of a problem here is beautifully constrained. It is simply an unanswered question in your immediate reality. If your car won't start, that is an unanswered question. You deploy your cognitive resources to troubleshoot the battery, call a mechanic, or, arrange a ride. You solve the problem.
The second category is understanding and internalizing knowledge to improve your life, career, or relationships. This is the deliberate process of acquiring information specifically to upgrade your ability to navigate the world. Reading a complex book, learning a new language, studying a framework to improve your emotional regulation.
Problem solving and knowledge acquisition.
That's it.
If a thought doesn't fit into one of those two buckets and it falls outside your locus of control, it gets discarded. But implementing this requires swimming against the current of human biology, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. Because our brains prefer to rely on the energy-saving heuristics we discussed earlier.
Right, the mental shortcuts.
Exactly. When faced with complex choices, the brain desperately wants to avoid the heavy lifting of pragmatic analysis, so it reaches for shortcuts.
Like trial and error?
Yes, trial and error is one, social proof is another. The assumption that if a large group of people is doing something, it must be the correct action.
But the text highlights that the most insidious trap is the familiarity heuristic.
Oh, absolutely. The cognitive trap of believing that because a certain behavior or environment didn't kill you yesterday, it is the safest and best choice for tomorrow.
Making decisions based purely on familiarity keeps us stuck in boring, repetitive lives.
It is the biological preference for known mediocrity over unknown potential. It is why we order the exact same meal at a restaurant, drive the exact same commute, and remain in stagnant jobs.
The brain calculates that the familiar route requires zero predictive energy.
Exactly. Whereas the novel route requires processing new variables, which burns glucose.
Yeah.
So it heavily incentivizes you to stay put, resulting in a life that feels safe but ultimately hollow.
So what does this all mean for the listener? Like, how can you practically apply this pragmatic filter when facing a major life choice, say, moving to a new city?
Well, we can look at how the author applied this to his own life after that London hotel room incident.
Yeah.
He had followed the heuristic of social proof, the conventional wisdom dictating that big cities mean big opportunities.
Right. If you want to be successful, you have to be in London or New York.
Exactly. But after living in London, he found he hated the dirty air and the crowded spaces. It just didn't work for him.
The reality didn't match the expectation.
So instead of clinging to the assumption that he should be happy in London because society told him so, he applied the pragmatic filter. He asked, will the outcome of a decision change the way I actually live?
And he realized the conventional path was actively degrading his daily reality.
Yes. So he rejected the social proof, abandoned the familiarity of the city, and made a highly pragmatic choice. He moved back to his quiet hometown where he could work less and make more.
It wasn't the glamorous choice that looks impressive on a resume, but it was the choice that functioned optimally for his specific existence.
That kind of radical clarity requires a mind that is thoroughly conditioned, though.
Right. Implementing this filter requires active training.
You wouldn't go to the gym for 4 years and then quit for life, so why do we do that with our brains after school?
It's so true. The primary training methodology the text introduces is the cultivation of slow thinking. In our current digital ecosystem, speed is fetishized. We equate rapid responses with high intelligence, but speed is often the enemy of clarity. The author highlights Derek Sivers as a prime example of slow thinking.
Sivers is a perfect case study for this. As a highly successful entrepreneur and writer, he found himself facing an avalanche of incoming stimuli. Between 2008 and 2016, he received 192,000 emails from his audience.
That is just paralyzing.
Right. And when faced with that level of demand, his instinct, fast emotional reaction was to go off the grid entirely.
The fight or flight response.
Exactly. First reactions are usually outdated or knee-jerk emotional responses. He wanted to delete his email servers, vanish from social media, become completely inaccessible.
But instead of doing that, Sievers took time to think. He engaged the slow-thinking prefrontal cortex to analyze the situation methodically.
And he realized he could remain reachable, he just didn't have to answer the questions.
Which is such an elegant solution.
Yeah.
It emphasizes that saying, I don't know, or give me a day or two to think about it, is a superpower, not a sign of stupidity.
It is a strategic maneuver. It shuts down the flawed, emotional, fast response system and boots up the analytical, slow-thinking machinery.
But engaging that slow-thinking machinery, especially when trying to acquire complex new mental models, is physically taxing. Which brings us to the biological reality of training the mind, something the text calls the learning wall.
The learning wall is so important to understand. When you learn new things, you eventually hit this mental breakdown where you feel blocked, get tension headaches, and just want to quit.
You feel like you've completely failed.
But the pragmatic reframe is understanding that this is actually a positive sign that you are close to the next stage of development.
Wait, really? The headache is a good sign.
It is. You have reached the absolute boundary of your current cognitive capacity, which is exactly where adaptation occurs.
So what's the solution when you hit the wall?
The solution is to step back. Listen to Jay-Z or Bob Dylan, play table tennis, watch a film.
Let the brain recover.
Yes. When you stop actively focusing on the problem, the brain doesn't stop working. It begins running background processes, consolidating the new information. Rest is the phase where the biological adaptation actually occurs.
Okay, so while rest is essential, the text introduces another technique for processing complex thoughts that completely bypasses our standard verbal operating procedure. Drawing your thoughts.
Visual thinking, yeah.
The author brings up Leonardo da Vinci as the ultimate example.
Yeah.
Because humans communicated in images before words, drawing frees the mind from that constant internal verbalization.
It forces a completely different cognitive process. You cannot sketch a vague assumption. You have to define its edges.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting. The entire book we are discussing started with a single, purposeless doodle of a messy scribble turning into a straight line.
That's right.
Visualizing an idea can cut through the noise better than pages of internal monologue. He didn't arrive at the concept of think straight through rigorous debate. He was overwhelmed by noise, and he simply started drawing.
And once you've trained your mind to think slowly and clearly and you know how to visualize the problems, you have to unlearn the conventional, rigid ways society teaches us to make decisions.
Yes, escaping the box.
Exactly.
And there is no box more universally accepted and fundamentally flawed than the classic pros and cons list.
The death of the pros and cons list.
The author traces this back to Benjamin Franklin in 1772. But the text argues these lists are absolutely useless for complex things like relationships or quitting a job.
Because they assume all variables can be evaluated linearly, but one single factor can outweigh all others.
Right, like a list might have 5 pros for staying in a job, but the one con is that your boss is incredibly abusive.
Exactly. The mathematics say 5 beats 1, but reality dictates that the one con has a gravitational pull that crushes the pros. It leads to binary limited thinking.
To break out of this, the author uses this great visual analogy of a maze. A person is in a maze trying to reach the center, but the prize is actually outside the maze.
But as long as you're inside, trying to decide whether to turn left or right, you'll never see it.
Right. You can only see this with a helicopter view.
Which means rejecting either thinking.
You don't have to quit your job to start a business. You can do both. You build the business on nights and weekends. You elevate above the artificial constraints.
And that leads to this fascinating paradox. To be a great thinker, you should actively think less on an average day by relying on habits. Action must always be greater than thinking.
Taking thinking out of the equation.
Because active thinking burns glucose. If you consciously deliberate over every minor action, what to eat, when to exercise, how to manage money, you experience decision fatigue.
Which brings us to the author's money rules. This is a highly pragmatic, emotionless system designed specifically so he doesn't have to think about it.
It's an automated algorithm for capital.
Rule 1. Don't buy shit you don't need. Resisting excess builds self-discipline.
Rule 2. Save at least 10% of your income automatically.
Rule 3. Stay out of debt.
Rule 4. Invest your money in things with a return. And this includes tools of your trade, like a $3,000 laptop if it makes you money.
And Rule 5. Don't be stingy, because money is a replaceable resource, unlike time.
That distinction between renewable and non-renewable resources is critical. Time is finite.
But let me push back on this a little bit. What happens when you just rely on a system and then the system fails or life gets chaotic? Aren't you basically asleep at the wheel?
It's a fair question, but the system isn't permanent. The only time you should actively think about your habits is when the system stops delivering the results you want.
Oh, Okay.
at which point you re-engage the slow-thinking mind, tweak the algorithm, and turn the automation back on.
So action is vital, but action without careful, detailed attention is just another form of rushing and impulsive thinking,
Moving quickly doesn't excuse moving sloppily.
which leads to the devil in the details.
Yeah.
The author shares a very painful story about a $150,000 email mistake.
Oh, the Wim A and Wim B story.
Yes. The author was negotiating 2 consulting contracts. Wim A was a loyal client getting a discounted contract. Wim B was a new prospect getting standard rates.
Standard business.
But the author was lazy with autofill on his email. He typed W, hit enter, and sent the discounted loyal customer contract to the new prospect.
Disastrous.
The prospect saw the massive discrepancy, got offended thinking they were being gouged, and walked away from a multi-year $150,000 deal.
Over a single millisecond of laziness.
Yeah.
And the lesson here is crucial. Don't ask why you made a mistake. Ask how to overcome it.
Right.
The author learned that brushing off details as it doesn't matter becomes a toxic habit. Perfectionism isn't actually real. It's usually just an excuse masking our fear of what people think of our work.
Like saying, well, I didn't try my hardest anyway.
Exactly. It's a shield.
Caring about the details applies to everything, even the book itself. Thoreau changed the title from The Art of Practicality to The Power of Pragmatic Thinking, but then realized there were over 83,000 books, starting with The Power of.
It would have vanished into obscurity.
So before landing on Think Straight, he obsessed over it. Details are how you show respect for the work.
But there is a vital counterweight to this. You also have to know when to walk away.
Right. The story of the membership site.
Exactly. The author trying to build 1,000 true fan membership site. Despite all this careful planning and attention to detail, he only got 78 signups.
And he shut it down after just 6 weeks.
Which challenges the whole hustle culture narrative that quitting is a failure.
Right. People told him he quit too soon. But this is like testing the water temperature with your toe, rather than diving headfirst into a frozen lake.
That's a perfect analogy.
Using straight thinking, he calculated the time, the cancellations, and the pressure of exclusive content, and practically decided it wasn't the right vehicle for his life.
He looked back only to learn, not to regret.
Okay, so we've optimized our daily thoughts, our money, our habits. We're sweating the details, but knowing when to quit. What is the ultimate endgame of all this mental engineering?
The ultimate prize is inner calm.
Yes. The ability to keep your mind calm under any circumstance without needing a $10,000 retreat, a yoga mat, or a drink. Just sitting, observing thoughts, and ignoring them.
But it doesn't stop with personal tranquility. The deep dive comes full circle with a poignant historical story about Charles Sanders Peirce and William James.
Right, the architects of pragmatism. Tell us about Peirce.
Peirce was a brilliant mathematical logic prodigy and James's close friend. He was essentially the original founder of pragmatism, but he fell from grace in 1884 due to a massive scandal regarding a divorce and remarriage.
Which was unforgivable in the 19th century.
It ruined him. He lost his academic position, lived in desperate poverty, and even slept on the freezing streets of New York City.
Just a complete, absolute fall.
But then William James, who had utilized pragmatism to become an academic celebrity at Harvard, stepped in. In 1898, during a major public lecture, James publicly credited the entirely forgotten, destitute Peirce as the true founder of pragmatism.
Which begs the question, why include this deeply sad story in a book about practical thinking?
It's the author's ultimate takeaway. James didn't strive to take all credit. He used his massive influence to save his friend.
Wow.
It allowed Peirce to gain enough respect to write papers in his final years. As James said, the greatest use of a life is to spend it on something that will outlast it.
And practically speaking, doing something that outlasts you is technically useless to you individually because you'll be dead.
Right.
But living with the intent to create useful things for others is what gives everyday life actual meaning.
Exactly. We move from internal chaos to clarity, which allows us to transition from selfishness to service.
What an incredible journey. From recognizing the brain as a tool that needs training, to adopting the pragmatic filter of focusing only on what we can control.
Eliminating the 99% of useless thoughts.
Establishing automated systems, sweating the details, knowing when to quit, all to achieve inner calm and serve others.
And to avoid living with regret, we have to remember the author's grandmother.
Yes, she wept for her past in her final years.
She was physically present, but mentally trapped in a reality that no longer existed. To avoid that, you must stop overthinking, get out of your head, and actually feel the physical world around you.
The sun, the rain, the literal texture of your cereal.
You have to inhabit the physical present.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering idea drawn from the text. The author mentions that he refuses to live life through a camera lens, constantly taking pictures he will never look at again.
Because documenting removes you from experiencing.
So ponder this. Is our modern obsession with obsessively recording and photographing every mundane moment of our present lives actually just a symptom of our inability to control our minds?
Oh, that is heavy.
Are we outsourcing our memory and our presence to our phones because we are too trapped in our own useless thoughts to actually experience the moment as it happens? Are we taking the picture because we subconsciously know we aren't truly there?
That is the ultimate pragmatic diagnostic question.
So take a deep breath right now. Observe your very next thought. Examine it closely. And ask yourself, is this actually useful? If it isn't, you have the power to let it go. We will catch you on the next deep dive.